Hello, all. This is Ashley Squires, the director of the Writing Center at Avila University, and I want to thank you, first of all, for watching this second video in our series on what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. In our previous installment, we looked at a couple of different types of plagiarism, and in a separate set of videos, we'll talk about how to properly format citations in APA and MLA format so that it's always clear to your reader what words and ideas are your own and what words and ideas come from somewhere else. So look for other videos in this playlist and on our website if you want to learn more about those topics. In this video and in the next two videos, I'm going to continue the discussion about plagiarism and talk about why plagiarism happens and what specific steps you as a student can take to avoid being tempted to make sort of sloppy or unethical decisions. So I think one common mistake it's easy to make when talking about plagiarism is to assume that people do unethical things like, say, copy somebody else's work because they are unethical people. But this is something that's known in psychology as the fundamental attribution error, which is defined by Patrick Healy at Harvard Business School as an individual's tendency to attribute another's actions to their character or personality, while attributing their behavior to external situational factors outside of their control. In other words, he says you tend to cut yourself a break while holding others 100% accountable for their actions. So in a plagiarism case, it could look something like, well, that person cheated because they're a cheater. Whereas in this case, I cut corners a little bit because I basically had no other choice. It was either that or fail the class or something like this. The reality of life is always a little bit more complicated. The way we act is usually some result of both our personalities and the set of circumstances we find ourselves in. But the reason why the fundamental attribution error is so tempting and so dangerous is that it can lead us to assume that we ourselves would never behave badly because we're not bad people. But the truth is that all of us may be tempted to be a little bit dishonest if we find ourselves in particular situations. So it's the responsibility of everyone involved in education, both instructors and students, to play a role in managing the conditions that can result in someone being tempted to plagiarize. These videos are intended to focus on the student side. There's other stuff I can do with your professors. And in focusing on the student side, we're going to talk about three common reasons for plagiarism and how to deal with them if you find yourself confronting these situations, if you find yourself being tempted. So, reason number one, procrastination. I'm sure that procrastination is a problem that most of you can identify with. It is certainly one that I identify with. Your professor gives you, say, a week to do a writing assignment, and for whatever reason, you can just always think of something better to do than actually sitting down and writing it. So you find yourself staring at the computer in the wee hours the night before the paper is due, and the ideas just aren't coming. And at a time like this, it could feel like just copying some stuff that you found on the internet is a plausible way to get out of your predicament. And given that it's like 3 in the morning, you may even find a way to convince yourself that you won't actually be caught and that this will all just be fine in the end. So if you find yourself in this situation, I'm going to give you two recommendations. One is a recommendation that you can apply in the immediate term while you're sitting at that computer in the middle of the night. And the other one is one that you can apply over the longer term as you try to avoid this kind of situation in the future. So my suggestion for you, if you are sitting at your computer in the middle of the night, is one that your professors might not love that I'm giving you. But if the alternative is copying and pasting from Wikipedia, then trust me, this is infinitely better, both for you and for your professor. Give yourself permission to write a bad paper. I'm really serious about this. A lot of the worst procrastinators I know are not bad students and not bad writers and not bad people. Many of them are perfectionists who will just avoid any task when they don't believe they can do it exactly right on the first try. And so they let the perfect become the enemy of the good. But let's kind of do some basic math here. The penalty for not turning in a paper at all is a 0. And typically, if you plagiarize and get caught, this is also the grade that you will get. Sometimes it may even mean that you fail the class or get kicked out of school. But if you turn a paper in and it meets the minimum requirements, but isn't the very best argument that you can make, and there's some grammar mistakes, and all in all, it's not the very best work that you can do. I mean, what's the worst grade we're talking about here? You know, a 50, a 60 out of 100? Those numbers are all higher than 0. So anytime I have a student who is facing a choice between not turning something in and getting a lower grade than they want, remember that the choice here is actually pretty obvious. Turn in a bad paper. I can work with a bad paper. Your professor can work with a bad paper. They can give you feedback. They can tell you how to improve it. But there's not much to work with if we're working with no paper at all. And with a plagiarized paper is even worse. So if you find yourself sitting at your desk at 3 in the morning with a paper that's due at 9, um, take a look at the assignment, first of all. Make some notes about the minimum requirements, the length that it needs to be, the number of sources you have to use, the topic it has to cover, and write something that just meets those requirements. And then let it go. And you can simply do better on the next try. Okay, but this is what you should do if you find yourself sitting at your desk at 3 in the morning. Now, once you have gotten past this crisis and you've had a chance to catch on sleep, here is a strategy that I recommend you use to address the longer term procrastination problem. Next time you get an assignment, a writing assignment, take a look at the deadline and then immediately go to Navigate and make a writing center appointment. I recommend that you choose a date that is in the middle, roughly exactly in between the day that the assignment is given and the day that the assignment is due. A common misconception that a lot of students have about the Writing Center is that your paper has to be finished before you can come visit us. And this is just absolutely incorrect. You do not even have to have anything written to come into the Writing Center, okay? So if you are making an appointment in between, then that basically guarantees that there will be at some point, before you're awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, sitting in front of your computer, panicking about the work you have to do. There will be some point where you will at least have to think about that paper before you reach that point. If you come to the Writing Center, we can just help you brainstorm a draft. We can also help you revise an incomplete draft. Having a Writing Center appointment gives you an intermediate deadline to work towards, and it's a low stakes deadline because you're not going to be graded. You're not going to fail. There's really no chances of anything bad happening. Only good things can happen if you make this Writing Center appointment. It might motivate you to get a rough draft completed before you come in, and we can spend that session coming up with a revision plan. But at the minimum, if you do that, it pretty much guarantees you won't wind up sweating at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the worst case scenario is that you don't have anything written and we kind of do a brainstorming session and you can leave with a plan, an outline, a thesis statement. You'll leave with something that will enable you to get started. And if you do find yourself in a situation where you're trying to get it done in the hours before the assignment is due, then at least you have a foundation to build on. And that foundation will be genuinely yours. It will be something that you yourself came up with, not something that somebody else wrote. And so you won't be quite as tempted to take somebody else's work when you have already begun to do your own. So if you struggle with procrastination, the temptation to plagiarize is probably going to come up for you at some point. Procrastination itself can be a difficult problem to address, but at the Writing Center and the Academic Success and Tutoring Services Center, we can help you come up with strategies for managing it. Hopefully this video gives you at least a couple of ways to avoid some of the very worst consequences of getting caught writing a paper at the last minute and some sort of practical ways to deal with this particular problem. Thank you.